Let's dress an 1860s baby. Hi everyone, my name is Caitlin. I'm a living historian who teaches other living historians by teaching old-fashioned sewing skills and copying original garments. So, one more month before we get to the cradle covers, because mostly of Instagram had a lot of questions about the little girls getting dressed video, and a lot of comments regarding potty training, a lot of comments regarding boys also wore dresses. And so I thought we'd kind of address some of that today and maybe make some clothes while we're at it. So I bought another mannequin. It was supposed to be size 6 months, but I knew when I bought it that it wasn't. The people online said it's about the size of a 12-month-old. So we're going to start off with, this is a lot more of me just in the sewing room. We're going to talk about dressing and how the potty and all that works. And then I do have an original dress, but I think it's too big. I think it's more of a 2 to 3 year old. I'm going to try to put it on it. I don't think it's going to work. And because I don't think it's going to work, we're going to make a dress and a pinafore to actually go on this mannequin. But I have all the underpinnings already done, so I thought we'd talk about it while we put things together. So we're going to start with a shirt or chemise. This one is copied from an original that I own. This pattern actually is from my friend Amy, who created the pattern. It's for free on her blog. So if you're looking for like little baby stuff, she has patterns for at least chemise and drawers and shoes. I'm not entirely sure what else she has on there anymore. But anyway, nice little shirt chemise. I ended up again buying an original that is this exact style. And you see it in Godey's 1861. You see it in other articles. And there are so many types of shirts. It's a much higher neck than I prefer. I don't like the shirt. We're trying a new one. This shirt will work fine as long as the neckline's cut out a little bit more, which I don't want to do right now. I would rather make a new one and then do that. So, brought an original. We may end up copying this shirt as well today. So, this shirt goes on. It's another stylish shirt that isn't going to go over because the armholes are too big. Okay. So this is for a slightly smaller child. That's fine, but it essentially fits like that. And I like that style a little bit better. And it'll be really easy to copy. So let's go ahead and copy one of these. I'll be first on the list. I'm going to put the other chemise back on, just so we can talk about diapering stuff, and then we will make that one. So in a lot of home paintings of children of this age, because we talk about diaper changing and potty training in the mid-19th century, what they're doing is sort of a form of elimination communication or classical conditioning, where they suggest starting about 6 weeks of age, the parents or the caregivers or nursemaids, whatever, are being with the child enough to where they are noticing the cues of what the baby does, like right before they use the restroom. And when they notice those cues, they start holding them over a chamber pot at about 6 weeks old. And so what this does is a couple of things. One, it accustoms the child to not sit in a wet or soiled diaper. These are not the type of diapers that, like, we have technology today where our diapers, once they wet in them, the wet seeps down and it feels dry to the touch. That's not necessarily how things were with cloth diapers. So this doesn't let children get used to sitting in wet. It makes them feel uncomfortable, so they'll start crying when they're wet, and therefore you kind of have to change them right away. And that way it's easier to potty train. But they do say that children should be out of diapers by the time they're 9 months old. I've seen a couple different references to 6 months old, which I think is really ambitious, and some to like 9 months old. So definitely before their first birthday, they're out of diapers. Now, in home paintings, so paintings of in the home, in very intimate settings, it's not uncommon for me to find images in portraiture of babies just wearing a shirt. Diapers are very full and bulky. You would definitely notice that. So even though if the shirt goes underneath where you don't see private areas, there's definitely not a diaper underneath, because they're not the slim fit things that we have today. They're bulky. And then when you have that wool filter over top, they're even more bulky. So a child of this age could, at home, only be wearing a shirt. That way when the potty cue happens, mommy, daddy, nursemaid, sister, or whatever can just immediately hold it over the chamber pot and hopefully catch it before any clothes are soiled. Now going out, you do see references to drawers of this age, and I have some here. We made these a couple of years ago. Drawers, this is to fit, size 12 to 24 months, so it is to fit a child of this age. And what you do is you just button them onto the stays, which I have here. See how easily they bend? It's not torture, I promise. It's literally 2 pieces of fabric with a yarn to kind of make them a little bit stiffer, and that's only because otherwise it looks a little frumpy. We have the stays here. Just going to tie these in the back. These make them a little bit more adjustable. Put them on the lower button. So there are higher and lower buttons for a reason. So you just like sit the child on the potty this way. Works really well for girls and number 2 for little boys. For little boys, I would probably put the back on first and then the front so that you can more easily undo. So like for this, if this was a little girl, for instance, all I had to do for potty is undo these 2 buttons and fold it down. And that would work for both number 1 and number 2 for girls. It would also work for number 2 for boys. But if I had a boy, I would probably put these up first and then this over top. So I would only have to undo the front to go number 1 for a little boy. Or I may choose to have a little section in the doors kind of open so that they can do their business that way. You see that mentioned in things like the Workwoman's Guide. So this is an option. I find this option cumbersome. I don't personally prefer this option. The other option is to go basically commando, which is a lot easier to catch waist when they're commando. Probably the choice I would make. And the ties in the back is only just so you can stretch it out as the baby grows. But yeah, you can do the little drawers. Totally fine. If that's what floats your boat, that's fine. You can also not do drawers. Okay? This is what we have so far. We have our shirt or chemise, and then we have our stays. Now let's do petticoats. I'm going to put 2 petticoats on. I have options for my lower petticoat. I could do just a plain white petticoat. More common would be a little flannel petticoat. They were really into keeping babies warm. Now we could put on a hoop. Yes, babies of this size were wearing hoops. So they could walk pretty steadily. They could be in a hoop. But you don't have to be. So let's just say we're going to do 2 petticoats today. So again, we're dressing this child mostly for home, but like dressing them for home. So nothing underneath. Potty is going to be very simple because we're at home. And if we went out, if we were doing something a little bit fancier, would probably opt for drawers. But we don't have to. Alright, I have this original dress, which I am, again, well, maybe it is for about this size. There's a knot up here, and I'm not sure if I'm willing to undo it. This particular dress I technically got for free, kind of. Okay, so it does fit this size child. So I bought a 90s teddy bear for 20 bucks, and I got a free 1850s and 60s broderie on glaze dress. So the back is a little sketchy looking. But honestly, yeah, this is actually the exact size of a child that would wear this. I think the petticoat's a little bit too long for this particular dress. So that's a beautiful broderie on glaze dress. And yeah, that could be for a girl or a boy. This is probably going to end up being my put on display once I take the blue one off if I haven't found something to replace the blue one. That's good to see. Alright, let's talk about clothes for play. Because that was one of the other comments that I got frequently was, well, what would they wear for playtime? It's the same thing, just a different dress. Well, let's go ahead and make more of a play dress and then a pinafore. And apparently a shirt because I don't like the style shirt. So we're going to copy this, maybe make it a little bit bigger, a little bit wider. Is the dress fabric. I love green, so I thought it'd be fun. I love contrast pipe dresses, and it wasn't really a thing for women's dresses, but it was for kids wear. And so part of me really wants to do contrast pipe in like a red. And then what we're going to do for the pinafore is I have an 1857 printout of Godey's Ladies Book, and it has the first pinafore and what it should look like, as well as dimensions and how to make it. So that'll be good. It says to be made out of diaper. And I have some tatting for the trim. We're going to start with the shirt, and then we'll talk about dress design and move on from there. So we'll do shirt first, then dress, then pinafore. Starting with cutting the shirt. I'm actually using a worn out pair of my own drawers that have ripped and been mended 4 times, which is my limit. At that point, I cut my losses and remake them into something else, like baby clothes. So I used the original to cut one a few sizes up so that would fit the mannequin, and then it was on to sewing. I decided to use my original 1870s Wilcox & Gibbs machine for this project. The first step was to sew up the 2 side seams. Ginger, my little helper for this step, wasn't too sure about the sewing machine going off right next to her sunny nap space, but she's better than her sister who likes to try to bat the needle when it's in motion. I decided to hand fell this project. Absolutely, you can machine finish these ends as well, but I've been noticing quite a few machine sewn garments with hand finishing on original garments lately, and I decided to give it a try. I do prefer the near invisible look of hand felling anyway, so I don't mind the extra time spent with the handwork. I cut down one side of the seam, folded the longer seam over twice to hide the raw edges, and whipped it all down. Honestly, baby clothes are so small that it really isn't any extra work to do things by hand. Then it was back to the machine for the hemming, which was just a 1/4 inch turn under and then another 3/8 inch turned under for a total of a 1/2 inch hem. Now I could have trimmed my shirt. The original used a tiny waved braid similar to what we would call rickrack, but the waved braid I have was just off-white enough to not look well, and the other trims I had that would be appropriate for underwear were just too big in scale for this project, so I ended up leaving the shirt plain. Most original shirts I have come across have either been plain or minimally trimmed, so this is a good period choice. So the top got hemmed by machine as well. The original had several spaces in the back where the top looked a little bit messy, so I didn't try to hide the messiness of the folding in a curve, where it can be pressed and eased in to look nice if you wanted to, but again, I didn't bother because the original didn't bother. The final step for the shirt, yes, this is really that easy. It's just a few small steps. It's putting in the buttons and buttonholes. I recently bought a lot of 250 antique bone buttons, so that's what I'm using here. I could have dug for my white china buttons like the original used, but the bone was also appropriate for underwear, and this is a great choice for working class garments or garments that aren't made to look extremely nice, so I thought I'd break out the bone ones today. After doing the buttonholes, the shirt is complete. Alright, let's dress up what we got so far. Now that we have fixed the petticoat and made the shirt. This is our little shirt. It's a little bit dingy. Yeah, I will put it in bleach later, but right now, let's get it dressed. I also like this style because it has no sleeves, which means if you did a really short sleeved dress, you wouldn't see this underneath. But yeah, there's our little short shirt. Stays, and we're going to dress it as for home, so we're not going to put the drawers on. Just going to leave it kind of bare bottomed. Those are the drawers, we don't need those. Let's put on the primary petticoat. There's primary petticoat and shortened petticoat. I'm thinking about copying the length off that original dress. That makes most logical sense to copy the length. Everyone likes to use that little diagram of, oh, here's what skirt lengths for girls should be like. But A, it only starts at 4, and B, it's technically 1866. It's post-war. And when you look at wartime images, you see a variety. You see some little girls with longer skirts. You see some that are like at their knee. And so it really does seem to be more personal preference. And that's not the end-all, be-all. It's a decent guide if you're doing post-war or very late war. It's not like the Bible or anything. We don't have to follow it if we don't want to because it's not our time period. And we see lots of variety in originals. Alright, so now we have our 4 tucked skirt, which at least is shorter. So let's go ahead and put this actually not to the side. I have to take measurements because I gotta make sure that the dress fits. Let's do the waist, which is probably gonna be the larger measurement, 21 inches exactly. And let's do the bust, 20. So we're gonna make it probably 21. It'll be a little bit bigger in the bust, but it's easier to have like a straight for kids stuff anyway. And I'll make it probably 22. That way it'll grow out a little bit. I'm gonna measure the skirt on this thing. 14 inches. So now we're going to use this. I don't think I have a lot of this, so we're likely going to have to face the skirt instead of doing a hem, which would be unusual, but you do see it. We're going to rip to make the edges straight. See the one edge, really narrow. It wasn't cut straight, which is normal. Alright, so if I wanted actually let me measure, how short can I make this? Oh, 14 is going to be so long. Well, I guess that waist was shorter. Okay, so if I it's only 11, so if I made it a 12-inch skirt, let's cut it at 13. Actually, let's cut it 14. We'll make it a little bit long. So we're going to cut 2 widths for the skirt. This is like the only age you can get away with having 1 yard for the dress. You know, because infants are wearing super long dresses, and once they start crawling, we get into short dresses. That, 6 to 9 months to about 15 to 18 months, you can make a dress out of a yard. But I'm just ripping off the selvage on that one end so that we don't have to deal with that. And I'll show you how we cut the bodice here. So I'm going to cut it, again, I want 22 inches wide, but then I need seam allowances. So I'm going to do an inch on either side. So we're going to cut it 24, fold it in half. Wait, half of 11, so that's 5. Let's just do 6 inches over. We're going to cut a slit sleeves. And I'm going to cut it all the way because I don't know how long I need it yet. So we'll find out in just a second. So there's going to be no waistband on this particular style. It's going to be a very plain bodice, but I do need sleeves. And I have here patterns from my friend Amy that she sent me. And I think instead of drafting, we're going to use one of hers. Just cut it as large as we can. To start on the dress, I began with the sleeves, sewing up the underarm using the antique sewing machine. That seam got filled, but this time we're doing the felling by machine. I also cut a fair bit of bias stripping from the red calico fabric, and I needed to seam all of that together to begin my piping. Then it was back to the sleeves. I finished cutting the slit for the sleeves in the bodice, then pinned in the sleeves and stitched them into the sleeve slit. This also got filled down to finish those edges. As with most mid-19th century women's clothing, I don't often find that all the bodice edges are finished on kids' clothes either, but with how kids romp around and then how clothes for children get more frequently washed, I opted to finish the seams the best I could. After making the piping by hand, because I think piping lays better when the cord is basted in by hand, it was time to start piping the bodice, starting with the waistline. Then the sleeves got piped to finish the hems. It'll not only finish the sleeve hem, but also give a nice pop of color. This is one of those things where you learn why piping has to be on the bias. Straight grain fabric would not take the sleeve curve like bias does. Then I took a handwork break and hemmed down the piping that had already stitched down to the waist and sleeves. Even on machine stitched garments, this is typically done by hand on originals as to make the seam nearly invisible with those tiny little prick stitches. While I was sitting, I also went ahead and whipped up the center back seams to keep them in place. Now the next thing to do is something I've never shown on the channel, but is quite popular with baby and children's clothing particularly. It is piping encased in a self fabric binding. This will be the technique that you see on children's necklines most often, but is nearly always seen with contrast piping. It allows for the dress fabric to be the edge, but you still get that contrast pipe detail. So we're going to take some of our piping and baste it onto the edge. This is also the step where we first attach the sleeves at the shoulder lines, as in this style the sleeve is mostly open. So it is one strip of piping all the way across the bodice neckline from back to the other side of the back. Then I took a 1.5 inch wide strip of the green fabric, the dress fabric, and laid it right sides together with the bodice. Then it was back to the sewing machine to stitch through all 3 layers at once, the dress, the self fabric strip, and then the piping sandwiched between the 2. That got stitched by machine all the way across the whole of the neckline. I laid the bodice aside for the bit to work on the skirt. Because it was handy, I used the same fabric I used for piping to face the skirt, but I did have to seam 2 pieces together. Then I stitched up both of the skirt sides. After that, I put the facing right sides together with the skirt and stitched that by machine all the way across the hem. Then it was back to hand sewing, starting with the bodice. That strip of self fabric got folded down twice towards the back of the neckline, then whipped down like you would a regular bound neckline. There's just piping sandwiched in there, but it creates a very pretty neckline. And then back to the skirt where the facing gets finished with a running stitch. I usually do a whip stitch for this, but many originals do use a running stitch, so I'm going to give that a try this time. I also decided it was too much work to hem the center back waist slit with the machine, so I just did it by hand. And then at the waistline, which I did turn under 1/2 inch on the inside, got gauged. We would call this today cartridge pleating, but the period term is gauging, and we use period terms around here to the best of our ability, for educational reasons. Then when you pull on that gauging thread, each and every little pleat that it creates gets stitched to the bodice waist edge that we piped earlier. The very last step for the dress is putting in a tape, for which I use an 1/8 inch twill tape. That goes in the neck and waistline to close and fit the dress. And that is it for the dress. We can move on to the pinafore. In cutting the pinafore, I cut the bodice first. Godey says to cut the bodice no more than 4 inches long, so I just did 4 inches. I cut 2 rectangles, 20 inches by 4 inches, and cut off one end at an angle to create the sleeves, essentially. Oh, this is really a sleeveless pinafore. And then I cut one of my rectangles in half, so I got 2 backs and a front. The front's the larger piece. Godey says the skirt part is 16 by 12 inches, so I cut that. Instead of leaving it as a rectangle, the extreme ends get sloped off to create a rounder pinafore shape. Then it's on to the sewing. I hemmed the side seams with that angle on one side of each back and both sides of the front, and I hemmed the center back seams. For the skirt part, the whole thing got hemmed along the curved sides and bottom, leaving the top edge raw. Time for a hand sewing break. First it was to attach the tatting along the edge of the skirt and part of the pinafore. I just used a whip stitch for this. I also added a gathering thread at the top of the skirt's waist. This isn't gathered much at all, but is slightly, so the gathering thread is needed. I used a 1 inch strip of twill tape to encase the gathered edge, making about 10 inches across the waistline. Then I did the same thing for the bodice. Each of the angled ends that will form the armholes get a bit of tatting attached, and the tops and bottoms of each of the 3 bodice pieces get a gathering thread as well. Then I cut a 22 inch strip of 1 inch twill tape and began attaching the bottoms of the pinafore bodices to the twill tape. This will finish off the bottom edge as well as provide a place to place a drawstring tie. The twill tape gets whipped into the front and the back, which is a common treatment I find on originals with similar finishings.
Now that I have a finished pinafore skirt and the bottom of the pinafore top is complete, I can attach them using a whip stitch on the very edges of the twill tape casings. My pinafore is starting to look like a pinafore. I went ahead and put in an 1/8 inch twill tape and tie into the waistline before I finish the neck. The final thing we will need to do is to finish the neckline, which is finished the same way as the bottom, just encasing the raw edge in 1 inch twill tape, whipping first on one side, then folding it over and whipping it to the other side. The final step is adding 1/8 inch twill tape to the top as well.
Alright, here's our beautiful little dress. I love it. I mean, I'm a big fan of green. I like green, and blue is probably my favorite color, but green's a close second for me. And it's just so pretty. Like, I made this whole thing up and I was like, I really should have bought more fabric of this because I want a dress out of this now. Do I need another 1860s dress? No, I don't. We have to go look for this fabric now because I love it. I love it. And this is the first time I've actually been able to do contrast piping because, again, it's vanishingly rare on adult clothes. It turned out so cute. And it's gathered a little bit, so it'll actually fit up to a 2-year-old. And I think the length will be good for a 2-year-old. I may have to tuck in here for a 1-year-old. This mannequin, I measured it. It's about 1.5 inches taller than a 12-month-old baby. So you can see where it lands on her. So for a 12-month-old baby, her feet would be around here. Seems to be about normal, but I've worked with a lot of babies, okay? Cared for thousands of children between the ages of 6 weeks and 8 years old. And sometimes 12-month-olds or like a little bit before aren't exactly the most steady. And so I'm not entirely sure about how long this dress is, but it does seem to me that even when you're shortened, it just seems to be about ankle length or a little bit above, which in this case would be fine. And then you see like the 2-year-olds in like little higher up skirts. So maybe I don't have to add the tuck. Maybe this will just work for 1 to 2 years old. That's one of the things I love about mid-19th century clothing is the adjustability. Now, are all of them drawstrings? No. You do see some with ties, you see some with pins, but we've been copying mostly ones with the drawstrings, even if they are super fitted. Like this is more fitted than what we have been doing in the past with the gathered look. This is a very plain fitted bodice, and that's one of the reasons I chose this style because I have not done this on the channel. I don't think I've done this on the channel. So yeah, this is an option. You see this a lot as well. I just tend to like the full gathered infant bodice look. But this is also really cute. I want to do something different. And even though it is a fitted look, you can still do a drawstring and make it a little bit bigger. So waist size, this should fit a 2-year-old as well. That's the beautiful little dress. Let's put the little pinafore on. It looks just like the Godey's illustration, which is great. It's so cute. There's the front side. And so basically it just fits right over the sleeves. You do see sleeved pinafores, but not all of them are sleeved pinafores. You do see ones without sleeves, and they're easier to make if they don't have sleeves. There's the back. Here's the front. Here we go. Isn't that cute? But it fits really great. I mean, the tatting just really sets it off. It's probably the first time I've ever worked really with tatting because I can't tat, so I don't really have access to that. I just had this. I bought it to make that chemise and drawers I keep talking about in the capsule wardrobe videos. And the thread used is just too thick for the to copy the original. And it's hard to tell online like what you're looking at. So I bought it because it was cheap and it ended up not being the right thread weight. And so, but I think for a pinafore, something that's going to be used and abused and washed frequently, I think this is going to be perfect. I'm glad it found a good use here. I actually have enough because this is just an edging. I have a double edging of tatting as well. That's the same problem. It's just too thick for what I wanted. So I could make a second one. I could decorate something else with that. That is an option. So yeah, this is definitely a nicer style pinafore. And Godey's did say this is the prettiest style of pinafore we've come across. I would definitely agree. It does look a lot better than most pinafores that you see for young children. Usually they're wearing a sack, which I just finished one. We're gonna I lost my SD cards. I have no idea where they are. I went on a trip and I was going to edit on the trip, and somewhere between Fredericksburg and here, and I took like 2 stops in between there, the SD cards it just disappeared. So a lot of my footage that I had done is like missing. I'm having to like redo some stuff, and there's things I can't really get back, like my mending videos. So I decided to take a whole day and just research pinafores, and it's already come out, but that ended up being a video. So you've actually likely, if you've seen that video, you've seen this dress and you've already seen the other pinafore. But that's literally just a sack pinafore, and that would be more common in like working class situations and like everyday play clothes because it covers the back as well. If you know children, just because this is covered and yeah, like a food and all that's going to get here, children get really messy down here as well, especially if they're playing outside. We have in the museum a little boy's play uniform. It's like a zouave. Paperwork says it's a drummer boy's uniform. It is not a drummer boy's uniform. First off, it's very reminiscent of play clothes. Like it's made like a little boy's outfit. You can't get dressed on your own, which no soldier is going to stop in the middle of battle cries and, oh, I have to go get the little 6-year-old dressed. Secondly, we know the youngest drummer boy was 12, and this particular outfit fits a 6-year-old, 7-year-old at most. So it is not a drummer boy uniform. It is, however, a play uniform modeled after probably father's uniform, just so he can play around and be like daddy while daddy's off at war. That particular little play suit, the back end, like right here where the bum would be, is just filthy. Like he sat in some mud. He sat in something. So this clearly isn't going to do anything for that situation, but it is going to help for like food, anything messy that she's doing like with her hands. But if she sat in something, it's definitely not going to protect the dress, which is why when playing, we probably want more of a sack pinafore type situation. Anyway, that's about it for today. I had a lot of fun. It ended up being a little bit more sewing than I was originally planning because we made the shirt as well. Anyway, if you've enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe to the channel, click that little bell notification so you're notified anytime I upload a new video. And as always, have a fantastic week, and I'll see you back here in the next video.